Hello, hello, hi everyone. Hello, it's Jane Tara from Better Reading. I'm coming to you tonight from home, and I have a very, very special guest who's coming to us from London on book tour. So tonight we have Philippa Gregory here on the Better Reading platform. So hello, Philippa, and I know that you've taken time out of your very busy schedule to join us and to say hi to our readers. And I'm a little bit of a fangirl like at the moment, so I'm really happy to be here with you and to be talking about book 3 in your Fair Mile series, which is Dawnlands. And actually, Philippa and I were just talking about the cover, and we both agree it's absolutely stunning. It is out in Australia now, and I know a lot of readers are already grabbing hold of this to read. So if you have any questions, pop them into, well, you know how it goes. Pop them into the comment section. I will read them out while we chat to Philippa and ask her about the book, her writing process, her incredible career. So while we're waiting for people to come on, I'm just going to just introduce Philippa, even though most of you on our forum know her. There's always some new readers out there. So Philippa Gregory is the absolute undisputed queen of historical fiction. Correct me if I'm wrong, Philippa, but you've been writing for 40 years after you finished a PhD. Philippa's very first novel was Wildacre, which actually set the tone for historical fiction and female historical writers. It was a huge bestseller around the world. And since then, she has delivered books like The Other Boleyn Girl, The White Queen, The White Princess, The Constant Princess. A lot of them have been adapted into TV and film. We love her historical novels, and she's here at Better Reading. So welcome.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to be with you and with all of you. Tonight, I should say, for you. It's morning for me because I'm in England.
Can you just start, while we're waiting for people to come in, can you just start by telling us a little bit about Dawnlands and where it sort of fits in the series? Because I know that it's book number 3, but it can be read as a standalone. In each of the books, you write in a way that it can be read as a standalone, but it is also part of a much greater story.
Yes, it's in that sense, it's a proper saga.
Yeah.
And each book we opened with a very poor woman on the south coast of England, in West Sussex, and in a sense we traced her struggle with her life as a midwife and a working woman in a very poor village, at the same time that she was living an extremely ordinary, very poor life. Over the water, over the Solent in the Isle of Wight, King Charles was fighting for his life while the parliamentary forces thought to bring him to execution. And actually his execution, this isn't a spoiler, Charles I gets beheaded. His execution took part in the novel. So that's the sort of the opening generation of the series. And then
can I just ask, was it, the pronunciation is Eleanor?
Eleanor.
Yes, that's how I read it in my head when I read it at the time. And I loved her because you have written about women in history, like famous women in history up to this point. And there is this character, Eleanor, who is a peasant woman and a midwife. And I loved her. I loved being immersed in her world, actually, in her story. It was fascinating to me in the first of the series. So go on.
So the second book is the next generation, really, and they arrive on a warehouse in London. So become part of the sort of the lower middling classes. They've got a wharf. They do a little poor trade with coastal traders into London. So particularly things like coal and apples and hops from Kent, that sort of thing. And then into their lives comes this extremely ambitious, very beautiful, very glamorous Italian widow who was tied up with one of the children of the family in Venice. And she comes in and takes the whole wharf's business upmarket because she's incredibly ambitious and because she has a knowledge of statues and classical art and stonework, which she's brought from Venice at the very time of the restoration of Charles II. So we're another generation on. And the English are starting to build these beautiful houses and fill them with art. And of course, Charles II's own art collection is incredibly famous. So in a sense, each book is, but you're moving down generation, so a different generation is sort of foregrounded. And in Dawnlands, we get to the next king on the throne, James II, and his wife Mary of Modena. That is not widely known in English history, but a very, very interesting couple and a very interesting dynamic. They're Roman Catholic. Mary of Modena is Italian. And so Livia, our Venice widow, sees the opportunity to get herself into court with a countrywoman and another Italian. And she involves the warehouse in the dangers and difficulties that is faced by James II at the very moment that Ned, Eleanor's brother from book one, is coming in from New England with his servant, who is a member of the Pokanoket nation. And so he's coming back to fight the rebellious war against James II. So you've got a civil war being yet again enacted in the lives of this common family.
So we have a lot of people coming on and making comments before I will start reading it. But I find this so fascinating because, of course, you have a PhD in history, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's English lit, like novels of the 18th century. Is that
it's
correct?
It's the most boring title I've ever published under, and I have to say, only 3 copies were published, and I understand why. The title is The Popular Fiction of the 18th Century Commercial Circulating Library. And the reason that it was that topic was I wanted to read what the people were reading. I didn't want to read the great classic novels. I wanted to read what the people were reading and try and speculate what it said about their view of the world. So you get, it's a time that novels are sort of invented. You get a lot of heroines who will become Gothic heroines. So you get a lot of women who have no story of their own, but serve as victims or rewards, victims to the villain and rewards to the hero. So it's a very interesting development of this idea of women, of heroines, as a sort of object which gets passed from the villain to the hero, or the hero to the villain and back again. There's also, I mean, there's some fascinating things about women's, what sexual behavior is allowed in the novels. The only 2 women who have sex, and one of them is raped. The only 2 fictional heroines who have sex both die, because you cannot be a heroine and have sex. I mean, it's just extraordinarily restrictive to women's lives. And I just found it a very interesting way of looking into the 18th century mind, not the mind we're offered, the mind of the Enlightenment, the mind of the philosophers, the male mind, but into the mind of the average literate person, which is why it was the most popular novels, not the greatest.
So obviously, as a historian, you and I'm going to ask you about your research process, but you take what you can find about whatever period you're writing about, and then you're placing yourself in it, and you're imagining how the women might feel or might be experiencing things, and you're giving them a voice. And I think this is one of the reasons that you are so popular, apart from great storytelling and great writing. It is you give women a voice. Do you do that? Has that been something that you know that you do and you've done on purpose, or is it just these are the stories you're drawn to telling?
I think, I mean, obviously, after doing it for so many books for so long, I am absolutely conscious that my life's work almost has been to put women,
at the
restore
forefront.
women's history. They're there all the time. You can research them. It's not that difficult. There's lots of records about women, but they're always made by men, and they're usually adverse. So
Yes.
if you read the court report, you get lots of information about what women are doing, but you have to read through the male language. So when it says they're unruly and disobedient, it means that they gave him some back chat. They didn't do as they were told.
Right. Yeah.
You have to sort of turn it round. So you go like, this is not a bad woman, being socially disruptive. This is a good woman being socially disruptive. It's just a question of bias. I mean, all history is really a question of bias. And so, I mean, yes, I think I didn't start off consciously going, I am going to write about women. I think I naturally was drawn to write about women because I was probably born and bred a feminist by a widowed mother. And that meant my first novels were about women. And then I just, there seems to me no point to tell stories about powerful men whose stories have been told over and over.
Yeah, absolutely. We have lots of people coming in. I'll just give a shout out to a few. Jessica Gill, hi ladies. Christina Dudley says hi. Sharon says hi. Carolyn. Bev says hi. Hello, Philippa and Jane. Looking forward to hearing from you tonight. Louise, hello, and a very warm welcome, Philippa. Christine says hi. I'm reading Tidelands at the moment. Wonderful. Jacqueline says, I love your books, and says hi. Andrea says, you are one of my favorite authors. Thank you for the many hours of happiness that you've given me. I think that's beautiful. And Christine says, Philippa, your books are amazing. Eileen, love your books. Hello, ladies. Hi, Jane and Philippa. Such a super big fan, Philippa. Been reading your books since I was in high school, and I've loved every single one of them. Can't wait for my copy of Dawnlands to arrive. I loved Tidelands and Dark Tides. Gail says, loved the first two books, so looking forward to this one. Rita says, so excited about the new book. And Eva says, I don't know how many of your books I've read, but I know I've loved them all.
Thank you. Okay.
Can you tell us a little bit about your writing process? So obviously, with your background as a historian, you don't just Google the history. So you must go through a whole research period before putting words to paper. But during that period, do you plot the book? Do you start a book that has already been plotted because of the research? How do you give us an idea of how it works for you?
Well, for me, it always starts with the history. So I decide what historical event is going to be the bedrock of the novel.
Yeah.
And that's always something that comes out of my current interest. So Dawnlands is very much about it makes it always sound so heavy, so forgive me, but it's at the heart of the novel is the struggle for democracy in England. That basically, after the experiment of the Cromwell years, the English end up with Stuarts on the throne again, and they have exactly the same thing happening again that we English don't like with Stuarts, which is that they're Roman Catholic at a time of very, very staunch Protestantism, and they're very much in the pocket of the French king at a time where England feels very competitive with France. And there's a great fear of corruption, and they're always rather decadent, and they're always very grasping for money. So all of those things combine to make the English very suspicious of the Stuart monarchy. And in 1688, at the end of the novel, finally, there's a rebellion which sticks against the Stuarts in that William, who is married to James II's daughter, Mary, William and Mary come into England and establish a monarchy, which is pretty well what we've got today, which is with agreement with Parliament. So there are limits to the royal power. And that's the settlement of what's called the Glorious Revolution of 1688 that suits the English. So I start with, I know that's going to happen at the end of the novel. And I know the novel is going to be about the process of rebellion against the Stuarts. And I know from the characters I've already got in my family that Ned is going to be on the side of democracy.
Yeah.
That Alice and Eleanor in the Wolf are going to just try and keep out of it so that business goes well. And that Lydia, who is a friend to the warehouse, she's going to drag them into the royal court as much as she can because she's ambitious in that way. So I do an enormous amount of research about the timing of events. There's actually 2 invasions. There's William's invasion, but before him, there's James, Duke of Monmouth, Charles's bastard son. He comes into Lyme Regis and raises an army, which Ned joins. So I have then literally a day-by-day record, historical record of the marching of the army, the taking of the different towns, the approach to London, everything that would make you think.
That's something you've put together, that record, the day-by-day.
I put it together for my own
purposes, during for continuity, basically.
Absolutely, but you could just as well Google it. You know, it's well known, it's published.
Yes.
And then when I've got that, that's like a bus timetable. I know I've got to hit those dates absolutely exactly. And everybody who's involved in the novel, everyone who is fictional, has got to fit around those dates. So if they're going to end up at the Battle of Sedgemoor, they've got to set off at the right time to get there. You know, the history determines the speed of the narrative, but it doesn't determine the unfolding of the narrative. I can make up a fiction about a fictional character. So somebody could change their minds, or they could die, or they could win. You know, that's up to me. That's my side of the story. But the other side of the story is the history. And then when I know what's going to be important, I go to the locations to make sure that I pick up what local historians are writing and working on there, and that I see the locations for myself so I really understand what's going on. This novel took me to Barbados to do research into the sugar trade there, which was, I mean, just wonderful. And when you get to something like a location like Barbados, I wanted, one of my characters is sold into servitude, a white servitude in Barbados, and I wanted them to escape. And so I was looking at what was the easiest way out of servitude in Barbados. I was walking around just to take in the landscape in a national conservation area, and I came across a cave which was labelled as one of the places that escaped servants hid out to escape from Barbados. And I was looking for this, and I've literally stumbled on it. It's so extraordinary when that happens. And that's why
exciting to do that for a job.
Heavens, it's the best job in the world. So I do that for about 6 months to a year. And when I'm clear what the story is going to be, and particularly when I have the characters very vividly in my mind, when I feel I can inhabit them rather than them inhabiting me, then I start writing. And the research goes on right the way through the writing process and through the editing process and after the historical checking process.
And how long does the actual writing process take? Because you put out about a book every 2 years.
It takes about 2 years to write a book. They sometimes come quicker, but that's usually because I've had a year off before. So I've built up steam, as it were. I mean, I'm very comfortable with an 18-month writing process now, because so much of the history that I'm including in the book, so much of the history that is the book, I know already. I've been working on this period for so long.
Well, that takes us to a question that someone I just saw. They're asking, I love your style of writing. This is Tracy. Would you have considered writing about French history, maybe Joan of Arc or Marie Antoinette? Have you thought about other historical eras?
I'm very English history, and that's not to say other people's history is not equally fascinating, because obviously it is. But by staying in England, I'm I have access to all the documents. I am very familiar with all the palaces.
Yeah.
I even know what roads are Roman roads and what aren't.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
you build up an expertise, which is
Mm.
very precious. I can't read Old French. I can't read Latin comfortably.
Yeah.
And, Joan of Arc, although France is, as it were, owned by England at the time of the Joan of Arc trial, she comes into my novel, Lady of the Rivers. So I
Mm.
do write about her a little in that novel, because the Lady of the Rivers is Jacquetta, Duchess of Bedford, who is married at that point to the Regent of France. So I do go to France. There's a novel, The Queen's Fool, where I go to Calais, but it's an English possession at the time. But I think there is something about mastering your own history and not trying
Mm.
to spread
Yeah.
yourself too wide. I know that the people that were mentioned are famous women, and of course of tremendous interest. Everyone always says to me, "Don't you want to do Eleanor of Aquitaine?" Of course I
Mm.
want to do Eleanor of Aquitaine,
Mm.
but it takes me outside my area of expertise, and it's very precious to
Yeah.
become solid in your research in
Mm.
period of history.
Mm.
Hard one.
Helen says, I'm blown away by all your research. And I just love how real the characters are interspersed with fictional people. I was especially aware of this in the White Queen. So can you give us a little bit of a glimpse into your writing day? How does that work when you're in the thick of a novel? How does your day look?
Well, like most women in the world, especially mothers of children,
Yeah.
my writing day used to fit around my children. So when my children went to school, I'd start writing, and when they came home, I'd stop. And that's actually a long writing day, because
Mm.
I think for me, it's very, very hard to write for more than 4 hours. I can research for a full shift, but actually writing, the concentration and the impact on the unconscious is so strong, in a sense, pretending that you're somewhere else, pretending
Mm.
that you are somewhere else in another time. That's very, very powerful.
Mm.
And I can't do it for more than about 4 hours a day. And if I do it for more than 4 hours a day, I find I start dreaming in character. And I
Yeah.
really think at that point I've muddled up my unconscious so much about who I am and where I live, that
Yeah.
we're getting a little bit detached. So the discipline of the children's school time was very helpful. They're now all grown up and have children. Some of them have children of their own. So that's not the same for me. But I get up in the morning and I let my dog out, my adorable dog, and then I put her back to bed, and I go back to bed myself with a cup
Mm.
of tea, and I write for 2 hours. And then I get up and have breakfast and walk the dog, and then I write for another 2 hours. And then it's getting on for afternoon by then, and I'll probably do another 2 or 3 hours of reading, research, or perhaps rereading what I've written in the
Mm.
day. And then the next morning, I reread what I wrote the day before I start writing. So there's an immediate edit process actually while writing. So there's a sort of
Mm.
reading and rewriting as I go through the book. And
Mm.
then
How many times would you edit the book? Like, what draft is it by the time you press send and send it to the publisher or to your editor?
well, the joy of working, when I started working, I am so very old. When I started working, I was on a typewriter. And so you could really see when you'd retyped a page, because
Yeah.
it put on a different page. And my first novel went to my agent with bits stapled in and bits stuck over. And she said, "You
Right.
really can't send a manuscript in like this." So we had to get it
Yeah.
retyped. But there's a lot of reworking which goes on continuously. So
Mm.
most of the beginning will have been rewritten 3 or 4 times,
Yeah.
sometimes 5 or 6 times, and I don't regard that as a problem. I don't
Mm.
feel that I'm correcting any mistakes. It's
Mm.
just I'm getting a clearer idea about where I want to start. The beginning is so important in a novel.
Mm.
I met a Gestalt psychotherapist, and she said to me that in Gestalt work, you go to someone's earliest memory, and that snapshot tells you everything about them. And
Wow.
I found that so exciting, such an exciting idea. Of course, we did my earliest memory, and that's how I want my books to be. I want, when you open the first page, the first paragraph, you've got to be bang. This is encapsulating what this book is going to be. And of course, you can't do it with a book like this, which has got so many characters and so many locations and so many issues. But when you open Dawnlands, immediately Livia tells you that she's going to court and nobody's going to stop her. So you've got her straight away. You've got James straight away. You've got the hostility between them straight away. And you've got the fact that the country is divided between pro and anti-Stuart immediately in the first paragraph. And I think, I mean, if you can also make your first paragraph really lyrical, really beautiful, really evocative, then, you know, then you've got a good first paragraph.
Wow, that's really great advice for you know, anyone out there who wants to write as well. And I know a lot of our readers, you know, would love to. We have a question here from Jody. Philippa, what has been your favorite book to write?
It's very difficult to say, because such an intense process working on each one that I really love them dearly when I'm writing them. I think when they're written and they're out in the world, then you love them for different reasons. So very often people will bring to me The Queen's Fool and say that was a really important book for them. Somebody told me, I'm on a book tour now, so I'm meeting readers every night at the moment. Somebody told me last night that she read The Other Berlin Girl at a time of great unhappiness, personal unhappiness, and she actually felt that the book spoke to her about female perseverance and female courage and not giving up. And you know, when you know a book is doing that for someone else, it makes you very proud to be the author.
Really special, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and it's very striking how different books speak to different people. But what they tend to say to me is that they felt supported by the story of a woman in real difficulty.
And who are you inspired by as a writer? Like, who do you like to go to read?
I'm very fond of the English classical canon, so nothing surprising. I think less mentioned probably is Ian Forster, who I think has a delicacy and a subtlety. So you think you're reading almost a social comedy, but actually what you're reading about is deep, deep issues about how to live with love and respect communally. I mean, just a wonderful writer of really unimagined depths. I read Jane Austen. Who can't read Jane Austen? Just wonderful. And I suppose my desert island book would probably be Middlemarch, because like this saga, there's so much in it. There's and it interweaves so interestingly, but it doesn't interweave in the way, you know, Charles Dickens, every now and then somebody pops up, they do a bump, you know, in television parlance, and you go like, you would never meet each other. This is Victorian London. It's too busy. You can't be someone else's long lost cousin and just turn up like that. You know, you can't come back from Australia, like, great expectations, and just turn up. You know, so I think there's you know, but in Middlemarch, the connections are never forced. They're absolutely credible, because it is a small village community focused on a couple of key families and their wealth and aspiration. And it's a very subtle book. It's a very, very clever. And funny enough, George Eliot wrote it as a historical fiction. She actually, it was her childhood home, but she actually researched it. She went to the British Library and read the newspapers of the time, so that she dealt with her own childhood as if it were a historical period, which I think is one of the reasons why it's got that wonderful sense of coherence. She's talking about a time, she's talking about developments in a time. She's not going, this happened and then this happened, in the way that we live a life. She's stepped back and going like, this is the age of the railways and this is what matters.
We have a great question here from Rosemary, and it's a really good one. I can't believe how quickly this has gone. So it's a good one to sort of wind up on. But she says she feels bereft when she finishes one of your novels. How do you feel?
I feel bereft too, Rosemary. It's
Mm.
somebody said to me that Virginia Woolf had said that every author, a little in them dies at the end of every book, because you've lived with these people and you've thought about them more probably than you think about anybody else for, in my case, as much as 2 years. And then all of a sudden, the manuscript goes off and they're gone. And Virginia Woolf says that's a common feeling. And somebody said to me, do you feel like Virginia Woolf did? And I said, no, worse, because for me, it's work as well. So not only have I lost a whole kinship group, but I'm also unemployed. I have nothing to do. And all of my friends have gone away.
Yes,
And I now deliberately organize my life so I have a holiday when the book goes off to the publisher, so that I don't just feel lost. I actually go somewhere different and start thinking about the new book.
Well, we would like you to plan to come to Australia on one of those trips where you're, going off after a book, because there are so many readers down here who would love to meet with you and to sit and ask you questions. There's more coming in, but a lot of people, Katie, saying thank you for your masterful work. Tara says, I'm excited to start this trilogy. Thank you. Philippa, it has been such an honour for me to meet you tonight and to talk to you about your books, in particular Dawnlands, which is my holiday read. I'm going on leave and I'm taking this with me. I can't wait to read it because it's number 3 in a series that I adore, like all of your books. But I know you're on a book tour at the moment. Best of luck with that. Thank you for your time, Philippa Gregory. Dawnlands is out now. Everyone's going to read it. And thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to meet you all.